Paul from Alexandria Knife Sharpening, Laser Engraving. So I wanted to pull the best tester out just for a second. I don't use it all that much anymore, but every once in a while I like to pull a knife out and test it and make sure the process is going good. A lot of times when I pull this out, it's when I'm doing a new process. I'm currently doing a 3-stone process with the Tormek machines. I'm just finishing up this Shun knife, and I got a couple more to do that I'm gonna be doing here in a minute. But I just was like, you know what, let's just see where this is coming in. I'm doing this new 3-stone process and a 2-strop finish. So it's an 80 to a 600 to a 1000 grit, and then dropping on the round leather wheel, and then shopping on a regular 1x30 with a strop on it, with a 3 micron diamond spray and a 1 micron diamond spray. That's the full process, and we will now test this to see where it's coming in at. Now keep in mind, when doing a best test, you do not want to chop the line. It is a slow push cut test through the monofilament line. You should see the numbers scrolling up. If you see someone chopping the line doing these tests, they're doing it wrong and incorrect and getting artificial numbers. Here we go. Let's do the test. $154. That's a really good number. All right, so let's take a look and see where that came in at. So anything under 200 is as sharp as a utility razor blade. Anything under 100 is as sharp as a double-edged razor blade. So we were right in between a utility razor blade and a double-edged razor blade. And for me, that is fantastic. And you can see here some of the other numbers. So new high-end cutlery edges often comes in somewhere between 350 and around 250. And that's what they're saying is a good range for, you know, regular new high-end cutlery. Being down here is fantastic, and that kind of shows you what a professional sharpener can do, even better than what you might get from the factory. All right, so let's talk about my most current Tormek process. I also am going to show you proper technique for 1, setting your edge angle, 2, putting it in the jig, and 3, actually sharpening the knife. And you know, we can all get a little sloppy sometimes, and actually somebody pointed out something to me in one of my older videos the other day, and they were like, hey, why are you doing this in the video? And I had to write them back and say, you know why I was doing that? Because I was being sloppy and not really using proper technique. So we can all fall guilty of that at times. So let's talk about like the best process. Let's show what we should be doing. Let's show the proper kind of everything right here. The first thing, it starts off with properly putting your knife into your jig. I'm using the new jig, not the old style jig. And I think it's what, the SJ45. And the main thing you want here is you want an equal distance from here to the blade edge, even with like the angled curve. So if that means turning this a little bit, because you can see that wouldn't be equal, right? You can, it's totally fine. Turn that jig a little bit. It doesn't need to be, you don't want it perfectly horizontal with the blade this way. You want it equal distance, even with part of that curve. Okay, so, and you can do this visually. You don't have to measure it or anything. So that's the first part. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna squeeze down with our clamp and get that on there. And visually, you know, just visually get the distance there. So you want them equal, and you can do it, you know, just eyeball it. You don't have to get out and measure it or anything. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna tighten the first screw here down to where it's touching all the way down, and then you're going to start tightening the back. Now you want to look then at the front, and you want as little to no gap anywhere on here, or it's not going to be centered. You know, the blade could be kind of flipping up and back a little bit in there, and you don't want that. So what you can do is you can loosen this, you can back this screw out a tiny bit and then retighten. And you'll A lot of times you might even have to do that a couple times, but you'll see if you look here now, might be a little hard to see, but there's almost no gap there now. It looks very clean across that whole blade. And that's the proper way to set that centering of this jig. And I've been guilty of that before. You know, sometimes I just get in and throw it in too quick. And, you know, do I always check? There's probably been plenty of times I didn't check and probably should have, because it's just going to give you more consistent and better results. All right, so now let's move on to setting the angle. Now, my new favorite thing with the Tormeks is without question the new knife angle setting guide. Ever since we replaced, not this one, this thing, you know, this is great for axes and chisels and things with really big bevels. It was never great for knives. If you don't have the new Tormek knife angle setter, I'm telling you, you're missing out. You really want to get this thing because it's just fantastic. Now I'm going to bring you over to this side and let's come in close. I don't think I've even shown this close before, but we should. So I'm going to zoom in here so you can see what's going on there. So you can see we have readout here, and these are our angles, and it goes from, here's 10, 9, 8, all the way down to 25. So the first thing we're going to do is set what they call the protrusion. So you want to make sure this is loose. You're going to come onto the inside here, and we're going to push forward. We want to make sure that all three of these points are in contact with the stone that we're using. And then once we have this protrusion set, we lock it in. Okay? And that's all you have to do. Now, to set our angle, we keep our pressure on these three here. And you'll see if I look down here, this is currently at 18 degrees. Well, we want this shoon at 15. So I'm going to loosen these, and I'm going to start bringing this down. And this thing is very precise. So I'm going to put it like as dead middle on that 15 mark as I can get it. And that looks to me to be perfect right there. I'm now going to lock that in. I'm locked in. I can take this off. Now, the beauty of this is now this angle bar and angle guide has been set for 15 degrees. And since I use all T8 machines, all of my wheels are the same size, I can go from one machine to the next, and I just take my angle guide with me, and my angle will not change at all. I don't have to redo any of the stuff that I just did. So now we're gonna get started, and the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna get a close look here, and I'm gonna talk about proper stroke and placement, especially since I got called out and I could do nothing but say, yep, you know what? That was bad technique. So the important thing here, especially on shoons, okay? So we are talking a knife with an extremely small bevel, almost indiscernible at times. Really hard to see if you're not looking at it under a digital microscope. You want to keep that nice, even, tiny bevel on this knife. So we're going to go for a 15-degree angle. Now these are quite dull. This would not cut anything. This would not even cut me. In fact, I'll show you that these are very, very dull. This is just not doing anything. You see, we're not cutting paper at all. So these have not been sharpened in a while. So the proper technique, as you go down the stone, when we get to the front tip here, we want to come forward and just up slightly. Okay? Now, the mistake I was making that I got called out for, and the person was 100% right, was I was lifting back here. Now, the reason I have that bad habit was because way back years ago, I used to use a laser level, and you can do this. It will give you an even bevel too. So what I used to do is in the very beginning, I used to shoot a laser right across here, it would give me a straight line. So once I had the angle and everything that I wanted to be set on, what I would do is I would set a laser up and I would shoot a beam right across here, right across the midpoint of that blade. And then what I would do is I would sharpen and I would try and stay on that laser beam even with the curve of the knife. And that's actually a really good method still for very curved blades. It works really well. And what I used to do a lot of times was just kind of imagine, I would get my spot and I could kind of see it in my mind's eye, like, okay, I have a line going across there, and I would try and stay on that line. But it's really not the best technique anymore, especially since these new centering jigs came out. The best technique is what I like to call it almost punching forward. So I got so used to the lifting, but now they say you shouldn't do that. It's kind of a forward push. So I call it like you start going this way, and as you start hitting that angle, I like to start punching and kind of bringing the whole knife forward. And it doesn't even, like, I use a nice gentle kind of pull forward with the hand. All right, so let's get started and I'll show you that. But I'll show you what that does and how nice and even it keeps that bevel. And this is very aggressive stone, remember? So here we go, I'm pushing forward and punching that little punch forward, right? And pulling forward. And if you keep your eye right here, you will start to see a burr forming at some point. These are really dull, so these might take easy like about 7 strokes. I'm seeing a burr at the tip. Yeah, the tip's already starting to develop a burr, but I'm going to show you this too. Look at how beautifully even that little teeny tiny bevel is across there. All right, we're going to keep going there. So I think that was 4. And you can see it's a very slight forward and just a tiny bit up motion. And I feel a real nice burr across that whole blade. All right, so now we're going to go the other way and we're going to do just the opposite. And pushing forward there. I can tell that that's apexed. I can feel it. It feels good. And we don't have a big wide part at any part on this knife. You can see our tip and our bevel is nice and tiny all the way across. Now we're just going to move up to a 600 grit machine. And I'm just going to take my angle guide out. And all I'm going to do is go up to my 600 grit machine up here, drop this in. So this time I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to go do my 7 strokes and we'll get through this process here. Pulling forward. All right, now I saw that burr forming that whole time across that bevel, and everything looks good. Pulling forward. And we're done with our 7 strokes there. And again, feels great. Taking our angle guide out, I'm turning around. Yeah, and there's no rhyme or reason for why I go from there to there. Yeah, I could have my 600 over here. I just don't. It's just these were the wheels that were already on the machine, and that's just the order I go in. I could switch them, I guess, one day if I felt the need to. All right, so 7 more strokes, same thing. Nice even across the stone and punching forward as we kind of get to that tip. And there's our slight little bit forward. Now we don't have a big curve in this knife. And I think you can see how much faster this can be. You know, it's a little bit harder when you're videoing it and talking. And I already see the burr forming at the tip. And I think I now see it at the rear here. Yeah, looks good. All right, yeah, that feels really good. And I'll show you that again. Let's see, very nice little tiny, nice even bevel across that whole knife. All right, so now we're gonna go on to our stropping. Now, I just put new diamond spray on it a little bit, and I wanted to see if that gave us a little bit better score than the knife I showed you in the very beginning of this that I just did in this set. Woo! You can see all that diamond dust going. Normally I have a mask on, I should have one on. Yeah, when you retreat stuff, a lot of times you're gonna see a lot of that. And I've shown before in other videos, this is the thing in the shop that probably throws the most harmful particles in the air is stropping. So that's when you probably should have something on your face. But I'm gonna take it out of my jig now because I want to be able to make sure I have a good angle here. So I'm coming out of my jig. Now I know this is set for 17, so I'm going to just come up a little bit flatter. Now this one you don't see as much flying off. I did treat this recently with a little Japanese knife oil, but I did also just put 1 micron diamond spray on this. Holy cow, it feels incredibly sharp. Let's see how we did here. We are back over at our best tester. I'm going to clean the knife off first. Just give it a little spritz here. All I'm doing is just wiping that diamond spray. There was little bits of diamond everywhere. All right. 153. So that kind of gives you an idea of the consistency too of this process. So the other knife I did was right, what was it, 154? It was really close. When it was the same angle, it was a 15-degree angle, and we're right in that same neck of the woods again on this one. I'm pretty happy with that. When I see the consistent results like that, really is something that makes me happy. I'm still gonna finish up here with a paper test just to be sure I don't have any chips or anything in here that I didn't get out. But I think we're good to go here. Yeah, beautiful. And I'll give you an idea how incredibly sharp it is. There's my block. Here is, let me cut the bottom. It's all uneven here. So we can stand this up here. This is Uline catalog. As I've said probably a million times, this is my test media. I don't change it. I always use Uline catalog. It's my favorite, and whatever you decide you want your test media to be, stick with that thing because you get used to the feel of that. If you go to a different paper, it might have a different thickness. I find Uline catalog's great because it's very consistent and it's also very thin. And the thinner it is, it gives you a great idea of how well that is going to perform. All right, so let's do a cut test. Freestanding. There you go. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that. And I'm gonna go finish up the rest of this knife set.